Welcome back to Mind Your Biz. My name is Seth, and in today's Creator Highlight episode, I've got a special treat for you. We haven't had a musician on the channel in quite some time, if ever, but I decided, you know what? Let's go one better than that. Why don't we work with somebody on today's Creator Highlight episode that isn't just a musician, but is also becoming a critical part of the cryptocurrency, Web3, and blockchain marketing apparatus over at Lunar Digital Assets, somebody who understands digital assets now just as well as he did music and performance. Welcome, Marshall Beck, or in other words, Metal Marshall Beck. What's the pseudonym, Marshall? What else do I call you?
Yeah, Marshall's fine. That's
all right.
Roll with that.
Well, welcome to Mind Your Biz.
Awesome. It's good to be here, man.
You know, yeah, appreciate you making time.
We'll see what. Obviously, we've known each other for almost a year now. Had a lot of like behind the scenes conversations. You know, you're fairly familiar with what I've done in music, politics. You've seen a lot of it firsthand. You've even seen some of the really crazier things when we were working on that NFT collection. I know you saw somebody snip our content that you would have never guessed would have snipped our content, or that I really had any affiliation with. If you want to talk about that so that I don't sound absolutely insane, you're more than welcome to do that as well.
No, absolutely. But why don't we do this? Why don't we just step back really fast? And for the benefit of the Mind Your Biz audience who doesn't know you either in the context of the work that we've done in crypto marketing, or your former life, right, in a more public role, kind of embroiled in political stuff, or with all of the marketing or digital marketing efforts that went into that, or maybe haven't heard of you yet in the metal scene because, you know, they're into metal and maybe just haven't seen you yet or don't know you yet. Who is Marshall Beck in a nutshell? And let's just delete all the crypto stuff. So up till getting involved in this industry, who is Marshall Beck?
Well, previous to crypto, I mean, I look at crypto literally as like a day job, right? So the crypto tech side of everything that we do now, you know, I was hired in because of my experience doing marketing, PR, you know, just the way that I've dealt with the general public, the people that I've dealt with, the things that I was able to get accomplished in multiple different industries up until this point. So a good friend of mine from 7th grade said, hey, you know, I'd like you to come work at this company. I'm sure you could learn this industry probably very quickly, figure things out, and, you know, become a key mover if you want to be or take on that role. Obviously, in the crypto atmosphere, I do not like to be publicly forward. I try to avoid the spotlight as much as possible. I mean, we've been talking about doing this interview for a while, and I kept telling you, no, man, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I'm not trying to get out there in the sphere that way. In terms of politics, I've also kind of pulled back. I'd rather be involved in something that has a survival rate above 0% these days in terms of my line of work. So we'll get into some of the stories, you know, of things that I've experienced in that nature as well. American politics right now, or I think just politics in general, regardless of the side, regardless of the opinion, are extremely dangerous now. And when you get very high level, like presidential asset level, and you're doing things that influence the lives of 7.4 billion people around the world very directly, your life changes very drastically, and you deal with things that most people don't even know exist, and that if you put it in a movie, people would think was far-fetched and unbelievable. You've seen very little glimpses of it yourself just by dealing with me. So I've kind of pulled back in that life. It's not a lifestyle that I ever wanted. I never got into politics. I never wanted to get into politics when I was growing up. It was never an aspiration of mine. I was kind of led into it because I was doing music professionally 10 to 15 years. I ended up going through the most litigated family court case in the history of Arizona. In 2014, they chopped away my free speech rights against the Constitution in the family court, took away my ability to promote my music, to promote myself from my bands, to even book shows. Everybody knows that whole industry at that time was run through like social media. So the government ordered me off of all social media platforms for a year, more or less, for speaking out, for saying things that they don't want said in public. And just I did release an album that had a lot to do with a lot of the secret societies that I'd written in 2013 about things that were going to be done to the world in the very near future. When it came out, everybody thought that I was crazy. They said the metal and horror media all called the album an absolute masterpiece, but at the time it was labeled conspiracy theories. And then once everything started happening in 2020, the way that I'd written about on the album, I think that's really when it truly started scaring the hell out of everybody.
Got it. And sorry for the interruption here, but Marshall,
Yeah.
which album is that?
So it's called The Final Aeon for All Humans. It's more or less like a depiction of class warfare if it were to happen in the modern world. To sum it up quickly, it's 5 songs. It's a concept album. It starts from, the general population fed up with the disparaging inequality of the financial resources in the country. So they rebel against the upper class, the elites, whatever you want to call them. It creates a big civil war. The media gets involved. The military turns on the people. They order everybody into a lockdown. They release a virus. Sounding familiar? Remember, this was written in 2013. I wrote it in 2012, released it in 2013. So when all this stuff started happening in 2020, and then obviously it escalates from there, we get into the harder core stuff, and I'm not going to give away the ending of the album. There's 2 different endings. There's a 6th song that we never put into mass distribution because I was told if I did that, I would be stuffed in a barrel full of whores and rolled down a Scottish countryside in this barrel and set on fire. So we haven't put that into mass distribution. Occasionally I leak it out to
threat, man. That's a very oddly specific threat.
Yeah. Occasionally I leak it out to different media. Actually, Metal Devastation Radio is going to be playing the entire EP tonight for their yearly Halloween playthrough of the EP and the album. And they do play that 6th song every single year. But aside from that, you can't find it on iTunes. You can't find it anywhere else. And when I set out to write this album, we were signed to Brain Damage Films at the time, which is the largest distributor of indie and gore-soaked horror movies in the world. So I wanted to legitimately make the darkest, the bloodiest, the scariest, the most mind-bending metal album of all time. And I put a lot of research into it, got involved with a lot of people that I had no business being involved with it. I don't think anybody should ever want to be involved with. That's kind of a topic for another time. But, I found out about Epstein Island, all the child trafficking, the human trafficking when I was studying all the stuff in 2012. And to know about those sort of things and know that they are actually happening and not being able to talk about it to anybody or carrying that weight is very difficult. Now, obviously, it's mainstream. It's all out there. Everybody knows about Epstein. Everybody knows about what he did. Everybody knows that, child and human trafficking is, I can't remember exactly, but it's, one of the unfortunately most lucrative industries in the world. So now that all that's more mainstream, you don't sound as psychotic if you ever just bring it up or talk about it. But before, when you have to carry something around like that, it weighs heavy,
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Again, you really only imagine how heavy a burden that must have been at that time, wanting to be more vocal about that.
Yeah, and you find ways to kind of cue people in. I think, even people like Mel Gibson have been talking about it for years, and everyone thought he was a whack job. But I found ways to kind of cue people in, especially when I was working for the Trump administration, working with that whole intel group. All of those people knew what was going on. Obviously, we all did. The group that I was working in, from what I remember them telling me, had lost somewhere between like 15 to 20 people in that line of work. And when I say lost, I mean permanently compromised. You get involved in that world and all of a sudden you go missing. Yeah. So, now the fact that it's more mainstream, there's more eyes on it. It's still obviously all of it's extremely dangerous. It exists, man. People know it exists now. So there's no hiding from it. There's no sweeping it under the rug. Now you can openly talk about it. It's more of a conversation of what are we going to do with this? Since it is supposedly so prevalent. Here's a question I always ask myself, and I've never talked about this publicly at all, ever, or really with anybody, but if this industry is that lucrative and there's this many children going missing, like 10,000 in Arizona, just by CPS alone, I think it was I can't remember the year, somewhere between 2018, 2020. I can't remember all this shit, man. They're between the music, politics, crypto. There's so many different, things to remember statistically, but
sure.
Somewhere along the line, Arizona lost 10,000 children. Where did those 10,000 kids go, man? Are you going to tell me that there's really 10,000 pedophiles out there, like waiting for these kids to show up in a car and a bus and a boat somewhere? So, when you start looking at these numbers and these statistics, overall, you have to sit back, at least I do, and I'm like, okay, so now that this is a mainstream conversation, humanity's kind of like at a turning point, right? Like, do we accept this as a part of our society? Is this just something that we do and have done throughout history? Human slavery, human trafficking, all that? Or do we actually do something about it? So it isn't mainstream. It's part of mainstream culture now. People talk about it. You're not a whack job. You're not a conspiracy theorist for bringing it up. What are we going to do about it? And I think that amongst several other things wrong with the world now, especially since, if you want to just say like the group I was working within, or Trump doesn't have the presidential pen, what has become of that since this new administration and the people controlling him took over? Where does it all go, man?
It's a great question. So on that note,
I see, and hold on, sorry, really fast, man, not to totally disrupt you, but I mean, humanity, mankind, humans, all humans, whatever, we're at a turning point, right? Like, I mean, everybody can see that. And it's kind of weird. Like, you look at ancient texts, ancient civilizations, whether it's the Bible, the Aztecs, a lot of them, they kind of point to this being, there's even, if you want to get into like the occultist belief or that nature, like the new aeon, right? The aeon of knowing. And it's either like the final aeon of all humans, or it's the aeon and the age of awakening, where mankind starts being honest about what it is, the environment that it's within, the world that it's within, and how do we deal with that? So.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, man.
And these are things I think about daily while I'm working. So how fun for me, right?
Sure. Yeah. Well, and the beautiful part of the medium of music is that there's so many ways to be able to portray the just give little breadcrumbs of truth. Yes. And little breadcrumbs of that awakening, like you're saying, out to listeners, and those who find a way to interpret it will have ears to hear, right? They'll be able to understand and decode some of the message there, and maybe, just maybe, you help free some hearts and some minds. But sounds like this has been something that's been an ongoing theme then that you've wrestled with in terms of how do you inject more substance into your craft? Because there's plenty of stuff that just, it sounds good. Plenty of stuff that makes people feel good. Yeah. Disco never died in the 1970s, right?
What was it? One of my buddies, dude, he said something. He's like, and it goes in line with, God, I can't remember who 50 Cent said it 2 years ago, but they were talking, some couple rappers, and 50 Cent was like, man, you know what that guy's problem is? You know why he doesn't sell as many records as I do? Is he reads. like too educated. I had a buddy of mine while we were working on this new song that we're releasing soon, The Destruction of a Man, AI Love Machine, which we can talk about in a little bit, what that was inspired from. But even when I was in the studio recording with him, he was like, God damn it, dude, you're writing a song. Can you just write a fucking song? Like, can it just be like something that people can bob their heads up and down to in like a methadone coma? Like, can't we just do that for a change? Why does everything need to be like it's some fucking Einstein or, not whatever, like profound intellectual capability thing? And I mean, my mind just works that way naturally, right? Like, I'm around crypto, I'm around the political people, and I intentionally surround myself with very intelligent people. They tend to make better decisions. You tend to accomplish more that way, right? Life tends to lead in better results than if you're with some fucking idiot that's like, hey man, I'm bored today, never done it before, let's all go do heroin, like, it's like, yeah, man. Yeah, you surround yourself with certain people, that type of mentality just rubs off on you. And then, you got to keep in mind, this is a fact. I've worked in media long enough, from politics, obviously music, crypto. When you're writing, there's a rule when you're writing nowadays, especially with the numbing down of society, that you're supposed to write for the masses on a third grade education level, and if you want to get secret society or cult about it, there was one guy that once said, learning must be thrust upon the profane masses, dosed in this is paraphrasing, and like in the most subtle ways and enjoyable ways as possible, because they'll never seek it out themselves. So,
well, yeah, I mean, there definitely is sort of a bell curve in terms of people's desire to improve themselves and to improve themselves specifically through education. So,
yeah, do most people though nowadays? It doesn't seem like it, man. I mean, at least if you're watching the news or looking at society, or going to fucking Walmart down the street, you walk through a Walmart, dude, and you're just like, you.
Yeah.
No, where I'm going with this, or like look at the streets of San Francisco or Portland. Like, I mean, where the fuck is this all headed, right? And then you got. Let's get political again for a second. You got China, who's like ultra militarizing their youth. They have like 3,000 different schools over there that they're bringing up the new youth of men. And they're conditioning them to be military leaders, political leaders, how to fight. They got them like building and disassembling guns at 7 years old in their public school system. And then you weigh that against what we're doing, and it's like, all right, well, I think we can all clearly see what direction this is headed in, 10 to 15 years.
Yeah,
and
no,
it's
for
scary,
sure.
man. It's scary, but
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, I mean, it's not like there's no recourse at all. But part of it is a cultural war, right? Part of it is a cultural issue where you can change policy overnight, but you can't change culture overnight. And so, like you're saying, being able to like try to legislate morality or legislate what you want people to do, or through threat of force, right? Or burdensome taxation, right? Through threat of all the tools that the government has here. Try to educate people in a very specific way and then shift their culture over time. Some would say that between the 1980s to today, that there was a bit of an agenda to get people to question their fundamental nature, right? Their fundamental, immutable attributes they were born with, for example, and start to make that part of their identity instead of being educated, learning how to make better decisions, like you were saying earlier. And learning how to create upward mobility for their family, but make
Do you
it
think
more
maybe
about
that would be intentional cultural subversion by, say, like a foreign adversary, or what?
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
Let's
I think that
drag it out.
I think there's been some evidence that there's been interest,
Okay.
from the Kremlin since that time to start infiltrating American society. And you remember that TV show or the streaming show, The Americans, right? About the Russian spies or the Russian assets that were left in the United States, and they raised a family. People always that show it takes place in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know why they make the show take place in the 1980s?
I mean, I could imagine,
the show writers decided to make it take place in the 1980s so that modern day Americans wouldn't be upset or worried, because the real life family that it was based on was discovered in the United States in the late 2000s.
Wow.
Just before the 2010s.
Yeah,
so people think that all this stuff is like, oh yeah, back in the Cold War. It's like, bro,
this never ended.
Who's gonna tell them, right? Like, this is.
And then everybody just washed their hands and held hands and got along, and now it could never happen again. It could never happen in the world. That's like the pleading cry of the ignorant, man. That even when I wrote this album, everyone's like, that could never happen. Could never happen in America. I'm like, this has happened throughout history. Why all of a sudden do you feel so safe? This is literally China's playbook. They've done this to civilization after civilization throughout thousands of years. I mean, you go back over and over and over. So
no, The Art of War. That book literally the final chapter. It ends talking about spycraft, like in depth. Spycraft, the different types of spies, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, you're gonna have to use spies, and they even go out of their way to categorize the different sorts of spies that a nation state might want to leverage, and they go out of their way to mention doomed spies, where that they're going to double cross based on the mission that you've given them, and so you fully expect that they will be permanently compromised, like you said.
Yeah.
right? He's doing spies. This was written about by Sun Tzu, bro.
Yeah, man.
This is
A
older
long
than the
time ago.
Nicene Creed. This is older than the modern interpretation of Christianity.
Yes.
So yeah, very old playbook for sure. Yeah, coming out of China there. But anyway, this is fascinating. Let's talk a little more about you though. Okay. Sorry,
Okay.
selfishly. This is the Marshall interview. So
I get bored talking about myself a lot, but well, yeah, let's go, man. What do you want to know? Like, my life isn't that exciting anymore. I live in a fucking shitty. We can go back to like the different things I've done, but currently, you know, I'm literally trying to live like the most peaceful, quiet life that I possibly can. And I say that somewhat ironically because obviously I make death metal and you know I fight competitively. But like when you compare to what I was doing compared to this,
I think I had a title card for you for that. There you go. I don't know. I didn't get it cleared by you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like I tell people I'm just living peacefully now. I just make death metal. I'm gonna start touring again, playing shows again, you know, competitively fighting. And they're like, that's peaceful. And then I'm like, well, I guess compared to what I was doing, you know, fighting to keep my son in my life, wondering for 7 years if my kid is going to be taken away by the government, if I'm going to be, you know, have more false charges brought against me that I'm going to have to fight through, more allegations. And then you go from that right into the political thing. Like, this is peaceful for me, man. I have an outlet for, obviously I'm you know, if you want to say that, like classically masculine type dude, you know, I haven't bought into the whole woke concept or ideologies of a man, you know, but
sure.
You know, so for me, this is peaceful. I have a good outlet. You know, even when I was in the family court, they were always trying to allege that my mind only worked as a cult to violence. I literally have that court order. I can share it to you. It's fucking hilarious.
My goodness.
And so when I was like, dude, I'm doing jujitsu, like I'm not hurting anybody. They're like, well, that's organized violence. So you're still participating in violence. And I was like, oh man. So you want to take on the whole Gracie Baja organization now and every jiu-jitsu and MMA and UFC guy that is raising a kid and has a family and say that they're not fit for parenting? Like, do you guys really want to take that angle? You know,
it's so rough though. So I was out at the Karate Combat event, Karate Combat 41 in Dominican Republic, and Maximo, who won his matchup, he had a very similar issue with the courts in North Florida. Or Daytona Beach, Florida. And out there, man, similar thing where, you know, he'd been at the same dojo for 10 years. And when his kids, who were also just getting old enough, two boys just getting old enough to join him, the one was kind of better at grappling, the other was kind of better at striking, and they got a little out of hand. Horseplay at home. Well, with the grappler, right, probably just fine. But with the striker, what does that kid do? Right?
Going back to mommies with black eyes and bloody noses.
And then he says, you know what, I really want to go to school, Mom. He's got the shiner, right? Because his brother kicks him in the face. Lucky it was only a shiner, right? But still, these are kids, right? They don't exercise the same judgment when they're getting into martial arts. And the courts just aggressively went after this guy. So my heart goes out to any father that's dealing with this, because we already have an epidemic of, like, I mean, I'll call it biblical proportions of fatherlessness in the world, and in particular in the Western world. What is it about Western culture that we've decided it's okay to erase fatherhood and then to make the courts and the states complicit in erasing fatherhood? I'm not okay with that, except in extreme examples. You know what I mean? I think we could do a whole podcast, you and I, on this just alone, because this is something that I worked very closely. I experienced, I lived it, you know, so I got really in the trenches with it. It's one of the things that I was working on very closely in the Trump administration, is the way that men, fathers, and all of them are perceived, obviously, because I'd fought and through it myself, even when the whole Kavanaugh thing was coming out and they were using the Me Too movement. It was me who got all of the women on the right rallied up to do the Him Too movement to get them through. Because I was basically like, look, they're using the false allegations again to like try to destroy this man and his credibility. This is the same thing they did to me. Here's how they do it. Here's how you combat against it. So I had like Candace Owens, God, who else, man? Anna Paulina, Tommy, Joy Villa, all of them were just, you know, pushing the Him Too movement as like, hey, man, we need to protect our men too, you know? So yeah, that's a whole nother, between the divorce rate, the incentive, the way that they've incentivized women to not have men around. You know, you're a strong, independent woman. You don't need a man. We hear that all the time. And then the divorce rate,
I believe it's last time I checked, and this was years ago that I studied it, like 3 or 4 years ago now, but the divorce rate was well above 50%, probably somewhere 60 to 70. 75% of divorces are initiated by women, typically because they have cheated. And then in 84% of family court cases, even though things are supposed to be 50-50, 84% of family court cases, the woman ends up with more than half the man's assets and the children.
Yeah.
84%, man. So you take those numbers into consideration, they're incentivizing these women to not be faithful, to not be loyal, to not respect the family structure. And then if you want to pull back, why are they doing that?
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think something happened. I think even like around that same time, no fault divorce in the United States. What was that? 68?
Yeah. During the whole feminist movement, that was part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. But then 1971, what happened to our currency? There's all kinds of stuff that I think during those two administrations where some stuff just kind of started to go off the rails, a little switch tracks rather. Not that it went off the rails, but little switch tracks back then.
Well, exactly.
Between the late 60s into the early 70s.
Moving things off the rails slowly, right? Like boiling frogs slowly, right? You can't just come in and like wreck the fucking train. Everyone would be like, oh my God, dude, it's a train wreck. No, you just subtly guide, you just move the tracks a little bit so that, 20, 30 years, the train's just going to fly off the cliff and everyone's going to be like, whoa, what the hell just happened?
Right. And that's just it. I think here we are 50 plus years later. Yeah. And I think we're nearing that cliff and the rails have just gone straight towards this cliff, bro. Yeah. It's a perfect example, a perfect metaphor.
The train is fucking moving forward full bore, man. And nobody knows how to stop it,
Yeah.
At least
yeah. Well, yeah. Cause now you got the vast majority of Americans that are starting to think that some of this stuff is normal, right? This is now normal. You go to, forget try that in a small town, go to a small country, right? Go to any other place in the world. And they're like, wait, you don't take pride in having your bloodline continued. Wait, you don't take pride in being their father or being their mother because that was your immutable, right?
Literally reverse bioengineered, bioengineered human programming, like instinctual programming to convince people to want the opposite of what your genetics are actually telling you to do. You talk about genius level psych ops and the amount of power and manipulation it takes to accomplish that. It's impressive in an extremely fucked up way, and I'm not advocating for it by any means, but it's amazing that they've literally been able to convince entire generations of people to be like, yeah, breeding and having families isn't good for you. Being alone and drinking yourself to death is better for you. We'll do drugs.
Dude. Right. Dude, yeah. You can't make it make sense. No, for sure. No. But here's the thing. We live in the age of mass communication, and that means we also live in the age of mass propaganda. And sometimes a bit like positive peer pressure or whatever, a little bit of propaganda is necessary for any government or any larger entity to be able to get people on the same, on the same cadence or marching to the beat of the same drum and united in some kind of movement. But it's absolutely been co-opted by groups that want to perpetuate these evil agendas through their propaganda too. So anyway, you're right. That's probably too much of a detour for today's conversation.
Yeah, no worries, man. I just did it again. I moved the train off the rails, right? Suddenly, I was like, hey, Seth, let's just go here for a second. And then it just went fucking slammed into the wall. We're still talking about it 10 minutes. All right. So anyways, about me, man. So before I got involved in politics, tech, blah, 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 I'm just going to pull up your list, dude, so we can stick to this agenda, right? We'll hammer through it. All right. So before crypto and tech, for me, it's a job. I just consider it like the same thing. I didn't go to tech school. I didn't have any tech training. Obviously, we can get into that later why I was hacked, and I've dealt with that shit ever since. It would not have happened had I been more aware of that type of shit. So I look at tech and crypto the same. Before I was doing that, I did the politics thing for 4 to 6 years. Before that, I was still playing music. I was still booking shows. I booked shows, toured, did all of that professionally for about 15 years. It was my only line of work. Occasionally, if I needed to get an extra bump of money or we were going to do something big that I needed extra funding for, I never took loans. Like I would go get a job at a telemarketing place or go deliver pizzas or do some typical musician bullshit, right? But when I wasn't doing that, I was booking and promoting a lot of shows. In that 15 years, I had booked over 700 different shows for all different types of bands, all different types of genres, from national to local, all over more or less like the western half of the United States. I did have a couple things that I did out like on the East Coast a couple times, but the majority of the bookings were like in the Las Vegas area, Arizona, California, some in Oregon. And then I was starting to branch out. And then when I started branching out, that's kind of when the family court thing happened. And as we all, I've already explained, that got shut down. But one of the things I was talking about in an interview I did recently that I thought most interesting about the music scene is, so I've literally booked for every single genre. I booked everything. Typically, the metal guys are the nicest. The metal people are the most easy to deal with, which is interesting because we're stereotyped because we tend to have the most aggressive sounding music, the most violent, aggressive lyrics. And, we look the scariest and the meanest, right? Or at least, unless you're like a special forces dude looking at a goth kid, you look like a fucking joke. But, for the most part, the general public perceives us as, scary. But I think consistently, the genre that I dealt with the biggest assholes in continuously, where they're just fucking mean, douchey jerks, dude, and their fans are assholes too. Surprisingly, it was reggae, man, and that shocks a lot of people. See, right? Look at your face. It shocks a lot of people, but they were just the fucking biggest dickheads, dude. I don't know what it was. I got along really well with the rappers. Even during my family court case, I was living on 63rd and Boulevard in Crenshaw when I'd lost everything, and I was living out in LA to pay all my court fees. Literally the most violent gang-laden street corner in the United States. 60s Crips headquarters is 5 feet from my front door. White people aren't allowed to be there. So I knocked on their door one day. I was like, hey, man, I'm not a cop. I'm just here trying to make ends meet so I can pay for my family court case. A couple of the dudes, I guess to talk to Nipsey Hussle there. He was running shit at the time. And he had cleared it. Was like, oh, yeah, I heard about him. He's booked some rap shows. Some of our performers have worked with him back in Arizona. So they cleared me to live there for a time, which is very fucking interesting. That's another conversation for another time if you ever want to get into that. But, yeah, man, I mean, I got along really well with a lot of the genres, and I was always somewhat confused, because I found it interesting that like the people presenting the meanest image and the meanest message to the public were like typically the nicest guys. And then they're like on the polar opposite, the people all about the peace, love, embrace each other message that are spreading that, making music sound that way, were like the fucking meanest guys, So maybe it's like getting the rage out. I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe somebody needs to have a psychological study for that someday, but that's something that I found consistently and persistently when I was booking. But yeah, so I did that. That was fun. I would never do it again. It's extremely dramatic. For each show you're dealing with 6 at minimum. Rap shows, you have like 15 to 20 performers. Bands, you have like 5 to 6 typically. You have to deal with their management, the venue, the staff, the bouncers, the fans. You have to deal with all of it. It's a lot of drama. And then I saw in early 2005, when I really didn't know what I was doing, I could easily walk out with like thousands of dollars a night. There was even a time when I remember after a metal show, I woke up like literally outside my buddy's house, just drunk as hell. This is fucking gross, man. Like covered in my own piss. I'd gotten so drunk, and I woke up and there was like $5,000 of cash just in my pocket that I'd like pissed on like nothing. And it was like, oh, okay, well, whatever. Whatever. Just $5,000. I'll make $5,000 more next week, right? And then I noticed as time went on, people weren't coming out to shows anymore. It wasn't just my shows in general. So you'd have to work like 5 times harder, lot more drama because everyone's kind of agitated. People aren't coming out to shows anymore. The pay's not there. The artists aren't getting paid what they used to, what they're used to getting paid. So I just kind of, I think even though the family court kind of put an end to it abruptly, it was probably like the right time for me to just move on with my life at that point. It's causing more frustration than it was worth financially, and just stress and dealing with all those different people all the time. I think the magnitude of, doesn't matter what industry, when you're dealing with that many people to get one event done consistently, that many different types of personalities, and it's not like the same team you're dealing with over and over and over. It gets old,
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I get that. There's some careers where if you're not right for it, you're just not right for it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, sticking it out for as long as you can, for the benefit of whatever your family or whatever your goals are, right? Like just
Yeah.
making sure you can get the bag so you can secure the other stuff you got to do in life. Like hats off to you, man. It's sometimes
Well, it was just
there's
like
some jobs
it
that's
was
not
fun
easy.
at first too, right? Like I was passionate about it, but then like once the fun wears off, you're not making money. It's not fun. Like, what's the point? What are you doing this for at that point? And then
Right.
everybody doesn't matter, dude. It's like coaching, right? Like you make a show goes awesome, and everyone's like, God, the band was kick ass tonight. The show goes bad, nobody shows up. It's all the promoter's fault. So there's never after a while, everybody. It doesn't matter if you do everything right. It's not. People start talking shit online constantly. Brings a ton of drama. There's no
Yeah.
money. It's not fun. Tons of drama. You wake up, you look at it, you're like, you're helping all these people in a sense, almost for free. It got to the point where a lot of
Sure.
times
Yeah.
I'm like, and they're not appreciating it. Like, what's the point? All right, time to move on. Fuck these people.
Yeah, no, it's like getting paid, or it's like paying for the privilege of lining up to get a kick in the balls. Like
Yes,
yeah,
by a lot of people continuously.
yeah, right, yeah. No,
Sounds awesome, right?
Yeah, I think we've all been through, like, I mean, if you've tried your hand at a bunch of different jobs, like you got to go through some of those to start realizing, okay, well, I can do something different or maybe better. But you made it through that, then into the political stuff, right? Tell me a little bit about.
Yeah, the political stuff wasn't intentional, really. It was more just like part of the whole. It's like almost like an extension of the family court case. Like they'd taken away my free speech. They were coming after my rights as a father. They just were unrelentless. And I had an attorney. He probably regrets it now because he's like a total Democrat. But he's like, man, if you want to challenge this whole establishment, the way everyone's working and thinking about all this, you're going to have to get involved in politics. I didn't think that he probably, when he said that, didn't realize, in some capacity, I'd end up helping control the entire fucking country in like 6 months by making the right contacts, but I'm a dude. I can network. I'm easy to get along with. I'm easy to work with. So I found this organization in Arizona that was making massive moves. They were booking this free speech event. I told them my story. And we were working on this free speech event in 2016 that had like Milo Yiannopoulos, Tommy at one point was confirmed. Who else was? Steve Bannon was going to come out, but Trump's people, his whole cabinet put it on. Mark Burns was there. There's even pictures of me with Mark Burns, like, Trump's pastor. He's like high-fiving me, hanging on me. Like we were buddy. We still are. We still talk a lot
Nice.
on online and stuff. And I occasionally get, I weigh in when I need to, when things are really out of control and I do have an opinion that I think could help. I still do weigh in from time to time. But so we put this free speech event together, and this was back when everyone still thought that like Trump was racist. They still believed the media. Not everything had been kind of like pulled out and extracted into public view. So people could be like, well, wait a minute, maybe something is odd. Something else is going on, So while we were booking this event, every venue that we had booked it at was getting swatted. And the SWAT team would literally show up and threaten these fucking venue owners in Arizona and tell them that, like, if you host this event, we're going to shut it down. And we have a bunch of recordings of this stuff.
Wow.
So anyways, I was very involved with that. We ended up finding them a venue. I got a lot of people out to the thing. I was standing up to, the tyranny of what I would just say at the time was like the misguided police, thinking that we were trying to host some like racist event. We were hosting a literal free speech event, man. And I don't know if you remember 2016, like Milo had been, trying to speak at Berkeley, and they'd been burning down the schools. And I mean, it was crazy times, So we were bringing them all out. And after the event, they came up to me and they were like, the Secret Service came up to me, and when they were hanging all over Mark Burns and some of the other intel guys, and they were like, hey man, how involved would you want to be with all of this? Fuck. And I didn't know better, man. I didn't know what the world, I didn't know what it was really like. I had no fucking clue what it was really like.
And it sounds like that point in the movie where there's a freeze frame on your face, making some dumb face. Like, yeah, little did he know he's about to fuck up. Like,
yeah. And man, I mean, I'm a fucking type A charger, right? Like I'm a fucking fighter. I'm a brawler, a lot of people have always listened to whatever I had to say in any capacity. And I did know at the time, and I still do. Like here's the thing, man. Like I wouldn't have my kid. I would not have had access to my kid had I not made that decision to stick with them. Because they did take special interest in my case and look it over and realize that, This guy's been in front of 23 judges 84 times in 4 years. There's something severely wrong with this case. Like, let's figure it out. And that attention wouldn't have come had I not accepted it. But yeah, I basically told him at that moment, I was just like, yeah, man, I'll do it. And they're like, well, how involved do you want to be? And I was like, I want to be involved I want to be at the top, like, let's fucking go. And they were like, all right, man. And so, I just started working with these people, this group. It's the same group that, is backing Carrie Lake and a few other people that I won't mention publicly just because I'm not giving that out, But yeah, we were basically like Trump's main advisory board. That's how I was able to get, a stimulus bill passed with AOC and all of that. So yeah, man, I mean, I did it. And that it was weird because that moment, not really thinking about it, like literally did alter the course of my life. That one decision that, you make when you are super young and you're fucking invincible, right? Like, yeah, let's go.
right. But at the same time, it sounds like it sounds like without this, you're saying that it's uncertain how you would have been able to move forward with the family situation.
I wouldn't have been able to.
There you go, then, man. I mean, like we don't even use this phrase anymore, but a man's got to do what a man's got to do.
Exactly.
Do. Like you won your family back, bro. Maybe you didn't realize it in that moment, but you won your family back.
Yeah.
You were on the brink. You were on the precipice.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people know that. The people that follow me, the people that know me in metal or know me in politics know that. They know that was a staple. And one of the things that impressed the administration so much was how long I'd hung in there. And I got to the point where I was going to court so much, man. And then, of course, they kept trying to allege that I was crazy. So I would go and I'd get cleared by some psychiatrist. I'd have to go through a bunch of testing. The judge would sit there just to keep the case going for whatever reason. And, the psychiatrist would clear him. They'd be like, well, I don't believe it. Let's have him send another one. So each one of these psychiatrists is like $5,000 to $12,000 you have to pay, right? So you're just being bled out financially. Meanwhile, I can't hold a normal functioning day job like a 9 to 5 or a career because I'm going to court so much. I'm going to court 4, 5, 6 times a month. And then also having to go to this doctor, this psychologist, this class, this parenting class, so they just, more or less were like bleeding me out slowly, man. And I think in part out of desperation, I did reach out to those people and be like, hey man, this is, and then I do want to pull back a little bit. Once I saw that this wasn't just me that this was happening to, this is like an epidemic, right, of fatherlessness and what they're doing to dads. That's when I realized this is fucked and something needs to happen. And even I saw something on Fox News yesterday where Larry Elder was talking about this. And I swear to Christ, it's like half the stuff that you read that he's talking about is like right off of my old Instagram posts. So they do that shit to me all the time now. You saw it. You saw it firsthand when we were working on the NFT collection. All of our copyright, all of a sudden, wow, man, 2 days later, Trump's issuing his NFT collection and it's our copyright. And you saw that, right? You saw that. That
was unnerving. That was I mean, just to validate this for the Mind Biz community. This is while we were having conversations about doing an ad push for a separate NFT project that I was advising on. So like, the timeline was oddly specific, and they had the developer talent to just be able to pop up their site and do all the credit card payments and stuff, move faster to market, but can validate that the timing was
right. The
suspect.
fucking way that we'd worded the ads, all of it, man. But so I deal with a lot of weird stuff. So my life it's calmed down a lot compared to how crazy and dramatic it was during the Trump administration. I mean, the group I was working within was almost like his janitorial cleaning crew. Like every time a scandal would pop up, we'd have to provide the counter narrative, the counter intel ops, all of that stuff to the mainstream media. So anyways, I'm going back into the political bullshit again. I know that we're trying to steer
hey man, it's got a lot of social gravity.
Yeah, man. People love hearing about it. They love hearing about it. And I mean, I do. I'm not gonna lie, man. I think about it all the time. I think about, what would have happened had we gotten the information out in advance as to how the election was going to be rigged. Again, my team did the audit. I do know how it turns out. My group is still waiting for that $75 million that Trump raised to do that audit, by the way. There's by the way. So, there's I do think about it a lot. But so anyways, during that whole time of my life, obviously a lot of very stressful things. Weightlifting just wasn't cutting it, And when I was growing up, my friends and I, like boys do, man, we'd fight a lot, especially in the 90s, even all the Von Damme movies, fucking Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter. So I was like, hey, man, weightlifting is just not cutting it, dude. Like the cortisol levels in my body are so fucking high. My face feels like it's going to explode half the time. I even look at pictures now. I look back from that time in my life, and I look like I'm 20 years older, man. I look fat. I'm like, dude, that's literally stress. It's fucking exploding me like a balloon. But so I started doing BJJ. That led me into jiu-jitsu, which I think one of the amazing things about jiu-jitsu, at least as an adult, is you still get that same fight adrenaline. You still get that same fight juice that you do from like striking or an actual fight, but you're not having to worry about like walking around concussed, right? Like you're not getting punched in the face over and over and over and having to worry about, going into work the next day and not being able to think clearly or,
Sure. And I'll say in terms of real world application, just looking at a lot of the like dash cam footage and whatever convenience store security footage, all kinds of security footage. It seems like in the real world, some of the submissions and chokes and the other stuff that's taught BJJ, that's primarily grappling on the ground. Some of those techniques, when applied to standing conflict, they're way more effective, and they de-escalate violence way more effectively.
And a lot of my friends joke now. They're like, man, a fist fight with you isn't like, you're not walking away with a black eye or bloody nose. Like you're literally walking away with like a life debilitating injury if I feel like giving you one, like I legitimately could roll a man on the ground or a person that probably thinks they're tough, like a big bodybuilder, and snap his arms and legs apart legitimately in like 10 or 15 seconds. And that's not me trying to sound tough or cool.
No.
You got your ankle locks, your knee locks, knee bars, arm bars, rear naked choke when applied correctly. Doesn't matter on the size, the strength, the gender of the person. If you apply a rear naked choke correctly and cut off that carotid artery using, that part of your arm, the bone. Why I can't even think of the bone on the arm name right now. It's racing in my head. Whatever. You apply that right, the person's going out in 7 seconds. Period. There's even a video like one of the
dudes, and then after that, you get to go to work on them however you want. I've seen I've seen some of the footage of people getting nasty with it. Like it depends. Like it's unreal.
What kind of human being you are at that point. I do know from what I've seen in jiu-jitsu, I think the entire industry, for the most part, does a good job of like insulating out psychopathic, murdering killer types of people.
Well, dude, you have to. Can you imagine somebody who's like a legit bad guy, like a legit like black hat, out to cause damage, bad dude, running through a dojo that you want to train at? First off, you'd be the shittiest sparring partner.
We get them all the time. They're white belts with no stripes in the trial class that come out to beat people up, and then they never come back once they get their big fucking balloon-sized ego popped instantly.
Right. Well, you'll see those guys at the bars. They're still out trying to pick a fight there too, right? So, but even still, the ones who like are able to able to hang for a little while. That evil spirit or whatever, that imbalance, that like lack of self-confidence, right? Or that immaturity, whatever it is, it just comes out eventually.
Yeah. And the ability to like take care of the people that, you're sweating and bleeding with these people, dude, and you're trusting your literal life and limbs with these people that you're training with. So if you're not able to establish that level of trust with another human being, it's not going to work because nobody's going to want to train with you, right? Or you just get mobbed. Like at my old gym, when we had dudes that would come up, we get a lot of like up in North Scottsdale, a lot of these professional athletes, whatever sport it was, come in, they, think that they were tough for the bodybuilders, and they try to throw everybody around. And I was usually like, they call it like the mad enforcer. They'd be like, all right, put this guy with Marshall, and I'd smash these dudes, like roll them up, gas them out. Especially the bodybuilders, because they're so big, they're not used to moving around a lot. So you just get them on their back and you move them around a lot. Their muscles fatigue, the lactic acid builds up. I remember one dude in particular, just a monster dude, came in and I did that to him. I was just kind of basically making him swim around. I didn't submit him. I just made him work, dude. And it's almost meaner that way, right? Because then he just can't tap out from a choke. You just make him like gassed out to the point where he's like wishing he was dead. And when we were done, the round was done, he like went over and was like puking in the corner in the wastebasket, like trying to make sense of what had just happened to him in his life. And the guys like that never come back, you know. I had everyone assumes it was a cop. We had a cop come in. A lot of the police don't like me because my affiliation with or the fact that AOC and I are able to get along. There's some idiots that spread rumors that I was one that started the whole defund the police movement, which did not happen. But we had a cop come in for a trial class a few months ago, coming in trying to kick my ass. I'm a fucking purple belt at this point, right, dude? He's a no-stripe white belt. Puts me in a headlock. Dude's probably like 6'6", 6'7". Big fucking guy, man.
Okay,
225, 250.
Right, but he thinks he's going to ragdoll you with his
strength, man. Yeah, and he found out very quick. I threw him right on his back, armbarred him within like 5-7 seconds. He screamed out, man. I've never heard a grown man scream like this. It literally sounded like a little girl. And of course, never came back, dude. You know, he probably had to go to the station the next day. He was like, oh, yeah, well, you know, Marshall kicked my ass. But you get these guys all the time, dude. I call them puffers, man. You know, you see it all the time. And when you're actually trained and you've been training a long time, you've been around MMA, UFC guys, all of it, you just realize that even no matter how badass you are, there's always dudes that can fuck you up. Yeah. And also, like, people that don't train are always like, oh, that guy got his ass kicked. When you're training consistently, persistently, and doing it all the time, getting your ass kicked is a part of your every fucking day life, you know? You're not winning every sparring match. You know, I even tapped to a fucking, I think it was like a 3rd-degree white belt like a month ago, and he was like, oh, my God, he like freaked out. And I was like, yeah, man, it happens. You're going to get lucky occasionally, you know, like not discrediting his ability to be able to do that at that point, but it happens, man. You know, sometimes you get like the Ben Askren, you get the 4-second knockout, you know, for a professional fighter. Like shit happens, dude. And you just have to adapt. And I think that's one of the other great things about jiu-jitsu is that continued ability to adapt, that ability to literally have your body feeling and telling you that it's going to die, but remaining calm and being like, no, you're fine now. Just pick your move and you know, do so calmly and take the advantageous position through your calmness and your control while still being fierce, aggressive, and brutal and fiery. But yeah, so I don't know. Jiu-jitsu has been great for me. I have nothing but positive things to say about it. If you're going through a tough time in your life, for anybody listening, if you're severely depressed, people that are suicidal, anything, at least try this first. It will change your life and alleviate so many stresses and teach you so many things that don't even make sense because you think this is just a bunch of dudes rolling around and women rolling around on the ground, beating each other up, getting sweaty. How much could I really learn from that? And you will be blown away.
Sure.
I would never trust anybody in a real extreme position of power at this point in my life that hadn't had some profound amount of martial arts training, you know? Yeah. I will just say that.
Yeah, no, that tracks. I've got very limited experience visiting some martial arts instruction classes and specifically, jiu-jitsu and I mean, with my limited experience, great. It's just been great experiences, even with kind of dickheads, right? When they were like kind of getting into the sparring group, still kind of this, very fulfilling, right? Very gratifying experience of just like, oh, did I get my butt kicked? Yeah, I kind of did, but I'm alive. I can try again, right? Like I can try next week. So
yes, and keep getting up and keep going.
Yeah,
and that attitude of like the resilience and the being able to be humble at the right times. I'm not some guy. A lot of people, you know, I think if you're too humble and you walk around too much humility, then you're easily controlled, you know, but you have to know when and where to be humble and when and where, in fact, you're not the fucking alpha dude at the time. And maybe you should shut the fuck up and listen, or maybe you should be quiet and learn how to do something, you know? So there's that element to it as well. And again, if you're not able to do that, you get flushed out pretty fast, right? So
sure. Well, this is amazing, man. So we got some life lessons from Marshall's experience going through the system in Arizona, most heavily, not just gosh, how did you frame it? You said it so well, and I've lost it. In terms of the number of times you had to appear in court, in terms of just dealing with your family case,
Yeah,
court.
I had the most litigated family court case in the history of Arizona. Like, that's an absolute fact. I have that
Jeez.
record. Pieces of it were all over national Fox News. They were alleging that my
Can you
involvement
submit that
in.
to Guinness World Book of Records?
I
Yeah.
don't know, man. I don't know.
Guinness Book of World Records. There you go. Yeah, there you go.
It might be. I don't even want to think about it. People are always like, you should write a book about it. I was like, dude, we wrote one song about it. That song did really well. It was picked up by all the metal media. Reign of Vengeance, American Family Court, Thy Seeds to Belial. That's all I want to say about it. That's a part of my life that I don't want to look back at. I don't want to remember. I don't want to relive ever, So,
Sure.
Yeah, there is that. Hold on one second, man. My kid just got home from school.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. Speaking of that, so yeah, he's here. I have him now after fighting through all that shit. So, yeah, there's that. And where were we? I'm kind of lost.
Yeah, no, just kind of recapping actually that.
Yeah. So
you're talking about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu being something of a therapy. Here you are with the purple belt, so you're staying the course, right? You're putting in that discipline. You're basically, it sounds like you're using this as a bit of therapy. That's kind of like helping you process all the other crap you'd been through from that
all
time
the trauma,
moving
man.
forward.
Helps get that like trauma like dripped out of your brain, right? Through like healthy endorphins, all the good chemicals that do it. And then there's also the fitness. Like, I'm 39 years old, man. I'm walking around with a legitimate six-pack. Like, I look like a 17-year-old gymnast. I didn't look like that in my 20s. There's no other. People are always like, how are you in such good shape? I'm like, why don't you try jujitsu? Oh, well, there's always the excuse, dude. There's my friends that for the past 7 years have been telling me they're going to come out for the trial class, and this one's like, just shut the fuck up, man. I'll take some pictures of the women I train with, and I'm like, look who's more badass than you are, tough guy.
You gotta be careful, man. I hear there's an entire Gracie school that was started because a young man, a teenage boy, got his butt kicked by a female jiu-jitsu.
Oh no, it happens all the time. No, don't get me wrong.
And then he leaned back in and got his black belt from the Gracie school and opened his own shop.
Yeah, no, I am not at all discrediting women fighters. Trust me, I fight with them, I train them, I roll them all the time. There are even some women that can kick my ass still, like some of the black belt women. I am not by any means discrediting female fighters, dude. Don't even take it that way.
Yeah.
I like to use it for the ignorant people that don't know about that, my friends that think they're tough, that, when I'm actually fighting with these girls, it's like, dude, this woman is tougher and stronger and more badass than you are, they don't take, it's more like a joke. They don't take well to it, but
yeah.
It is what
yeah,
it is.
No, but I believe that. I actually believe that. Anyway, we're coming up on an hour, going a little bit longer than
that went fast.
Yeah. No, I know it's the thing. And it seems like every single time we talk, it winds up a little bit like this.
Yeah.
But let's recap just a little bit. So jiu-jitsu is now this core part of your life and what you do to make sense of a lot of your world, certainly, and to propagate these life lessons that were hard won by you. And then that helped you get through this whole time when you were getting involved in politics. Sounds like that whole chapter of your life has been closed, right? No longer involved in any of that. Now
I try not to be, but occasionally it like bleeds through, there's always, and then especially they always want me to be, like, I can reach out to any single one of them at any time, and everyone's still always trying to get me back involved. But yeah, I'm trying to close that chapter of that book. So
sure, but
it doesn't serve me in any form of constructive purpose now. And it never truly did work for me. I mean, let's be honest. I should have never had my son taken from me in the first place, right? That's just kind of like a bullshit flaw in our society that I had to ramrod through. So in my doing so, there were a lot of people that made a lot of money and profited a lot from my pain and my struggle, and I never saw a dime from it.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm moving on with my life, man. I'm building a good life. That's what I fought to build, right? To get through all that is to build a good life for my son and I. But so yeah, that chapter's closed right now. It's just jiu-jitsu, it's music, it's the day job, marketing and doing PR in the crypto industry, which is going very well. We have suppose you come on there yourself, we have the supposed #1 podcast in all of the crypto industry with All Roads Lead to Polygon, which I do the booking for, me and another guy. So there's that. There's the focus of that. and jiu-jitsu, music. I never talked about it, but I'm also a published author. Like I have a bunch of different horror stories and books that have been released that are carried by Barnes and Nobles. I don't even know if you knew that.
No, man, you've been holding out on me.
Yeah, I have a bunch of them. Like for a long time, Fangoria magazine was like, dude, you could be the next Stephen King. They like wrote a bunch of articles about my horror stories. And yeah, I think if you go to merchandise, albums, shirts, and books, I don't even think it's all up to date with everything that I've had published. Like I have let's see if the horror story collective for kids is even up there. Scroll down. So there's a family corridor if you ever get curious. Scroll down a little bit more.
Wow.
So there's the book. There's my first book that I wrote when I was 23 that was published. It's a collection of like 6 or 7 short horror stories, extremely brutal, extremely graphic, received raving reviews by every horror media outlet that I gave it to. The Dark Path is another short story I did. Support the Local Scene Bro is another short story, horror story. And then I do have a short collective of kids' horror stories titled The World of Horror, which, kind of has some of that nostalgic artwork from like the 90s of stuff that you and I more or less probably grew up. If you're a fan of horror, that probably got us into it. It has a bit of a throwback. So yeah, man, I'm also a published horror author. I forgot about that.
Okay, so you got a bunch of this stuff here then.
Those are all the CDs that people can buy.
Swine. This character looks an awful lot like Bill Gates. That wasn't intentional.
That's Jor Pyle, the most infamous sheriff from Arizona. Yeah, the MCSO didn't take too kindly to that. Oddly enough, during my political days, I was asked if I wanted to run his social media campaign when he was going for, I think it was like Congress or something. They sat me down, acted like they didn't know who I was, and then started quoting things from my Facebook to me like from years ago that I posted about him. I was like, well, this is fucking creepy.
Jeez, right? Well, there you go. I think we've all lived long enough to regret ever joining social media on a personal account, I think.
Yeah, dude,
so, man. Yeah, sorry, not sorry. I guess genie's out of the bottle there. Well, yeah. So this is the site here. This is also it's in the show notes there, guys, in the description of the video. So if you want to see metalmarshallbeck.com, check out all the sweet merch there. He's not going to say it, but I'm going to say it. Go buy a t-shirt. Go check out the collection of stories. Go check out the other published works. Will you have an update here for upcoming stuff? Not just merch, but upcoming music, upcoming tour dates, or anything? What is there to look forward to here on metalmarshallbeck.com?
So right now I'm currently working with a European booking agent about booking a few European tours for 2024. Metallurg Booking, they also have a big metal magazine over there that they just put me on the cover of, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we're actively working on booking those tour dates. We do have a new song dropping on October 31st, Halloween, called The Destruction of a Man, AI Love Machine, which tackles the current debate between, artificial intelligence girlfriends, all of that. Obviously, I took some of my own inspiration from dealing with the girls from Fox News and Miss Dances with Knives, if you want to call her that. That gets mad every time I go hang out with the Rogue Bunnies, starts dancing with her knives, some pop singer that also has me hacked. So I took some inspiration in that. I don't want to give away the whole song, what it's about, but it's, again, like a story theme, a concept story. The graphics design guy, I believe he works for Century Media Records, did the graphic novel artwork for that music video. And then one of the A&R guys at Sony Records actually assembled it all for us. So it's that industry standard major label quality. That comes out again October 31st. It will be premiering worldwide. Yeah, man, we did just sell an NFT collection last week that sold really well on the Pulse Chain blockchain for the final Aeons of All Humans. People got the gold or blood inked box set, and then all the songs and the materials, or a lot of the songs and materials that came with that actual EP release. So
that's awesome. Okay, so amazing. Upcoming dates, you mentioned October 31st is when this is happening. Halloween. Anything else for the Halloween 2023? Anything else for the remainder of 2023, or do we have to wait until 2024?
We'll see, man. We'll see at this point. I don't have anything planned, but that's typically how the music industry just works. You're like, hey, you get in that creative grind and then you just fucking go, right? Or you think the creative grind is going to come and then all of a sudden you get one thing out and it just dies. So if the momentum builds and the desire's there and the band is all feeling it, we might have another song out by 2023, or might do a couple shows, just kind of, we'll see how this release goes in 4 days, and we'll take it from there.
Amazing. Okay. Well, Marshall, thanks so much for being on the channel. Really appreciate you making time for this.
Yeah, man. I appreciate the 30-minute interview that fucking blended into hour 15. that went, I mean, it felt like 30 seconds, I was like, 20 minutes. What the fuck am I going to talk about for 20 minutes?
Right.
Here we are.
Man, it always goes faster than you think, but really appreciate you making the time for it.
Of course.
Where else should people find you or contact you? Are you active on any of the social platforms? What's the best?
So there's always, like, you can go on Instagram. Just again, be careful what you say right to me on there. You've seen it firsthand. I got some very powerful people that like to attack my friends when I don't pay attention to them there. And I'm talking like pop stars, political women at Fox News, whatever. Crazy life. So yeah, you can reach me on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I barely ever check that. I try not to, not to sound too snobby or whatever, but I'm trying to pull back from like the public life. So I'm trying to not be so easy to contact anymore, like just at the advice of a lot of people. So there's those avenues. And then, you can always Google. I've had a bunch of different projects. You could Google my name. You could see all the different books that I've released. You can see the different music projects that I've been a part of. That's obviously probably the best way, just to see everything along with that website. So yeah, man, I mean, that pretty much sums it all up, I think, from my end.
Okay, amazing. Well, appreciate you again being on the channel. Mind Your Biz community, check all the links. Anything that Marshall just mentioned is available as a link down below in the description of this video. It costs you nothing to click those links, to go subscribe, to have notifications turned on, and to be aware of what Marshall is producing in the not too distant future. So what are you waiting for? Go do it. Right, go do it. Follow everything this man's making. Definitely put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to create the products that he has available right now and that he's bringing to you on this October 31st release. So least you can do. Go follow in all those socials. Marshall, thank you so much again.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me on. It was good to actually do this publicly. I mean, these are how a lot of our conversations go in private, right? Like, obviously you talk more, but it's more like
maybe a little bit.
Yeah. Just, hey, Seth, look at me and how fucking blah 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 all the time, Well, yeah, no, man, it was good to do this in public. It's fun.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
This is my second interview that I've given voice wise since doing politics and doing all the family court stuff. So I'm glad we were able to do that.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And then I guess we'll have to do a Mind Your Biz community. Let us know if you want to see an encore, talk about any of those, kind of an expanded view, any of those tangents that Marshall brought up, because I can promise you we've dived down a couple of those rabbit holes just a little bit on private calls. And I think that
we could go for hours, man. We could literally,
now
that I've seen how fast this has gone, we could probably make this like 4 or 5 hours accidentally if we wanted to,
So there you go, guys. Thumbs up. Let the algorithm know this is fun. This is great stuff. These are stories that you want other people to hear and that we can get more of if we do a follow-up as well. So again, Marshall, thank you so much. And to the audience, guys, remember, you're the reason I make this media. I love your face. Remember to stay private and mind your biz.
Yeah.